Welcome to the channel, everyone. Today, we're stepping inside the razor-wire-topped walls, the clanging steel gates, the cold, echoing corridors of some of the most notorious prisons on the planet. From the favelas of South America to the frozen wastelands of Siberia and beyond, we'll be meeting the inmates, the guards, and the people who run these places, and witnessing firsthand the brutal conditions that define these human warehouses, where survival is a daily struggle. Right, first up we find ourselves in Venezuela, home to La Sabaneta prison, one of the most notorious penitentiaries in the world. Overcrowding isn't just a problem here, it's practically the law of the land. Cells meant for a handful of inmates now hold dozens, thousands of inmates crammed into a space designed for a fraction, living on top of each other, with barely any room to breathe, tensions simmering like a pot on the verge of boiling over, ready to explode at any moment. Violence is woven into the fabric of daily life here. Gangs rule the roost, wielding makeshift weapons, controlling the flow of drugs and whatever other contraband manages to find its way inside. The black market thrives. The guards? Well, let's just say they tend to pick their battles carefully, often turning a blind eye. Understaffed, outgunned, and often out of their depth, they struggle to maintain order. Amidst the squalor and brutality, there are still glimmers of humanity, inmates forming bonds of camaraderie in the face of unimaginable adversity, finding solace in each other. From the sweltering chaos of Venezuela we travel north, far north, to the frozen heart of Russia, to a place called Black Dolphin Prison. This is a maximum security lockup, home to Russia's hardest cases, the murderers, terrorists, and gangsters deemed too dangerous for anywhere else. Forget rehabilitation, this place is all about punishment and isolation. Inmates spend 23 hours a day locked in their cells, tiny, cramped boxes where even standing up straight is a luxury. When they do emerge, it's always blindfolded, always with two guards, always in complete silence. The psychological impact is, as you can imagine, pretty severe. But even in this bleak and unforgiving environment, there are stories of men grappling with their crimes, seeking redemption in the face of unimaginable odds. Our next stop takes us to the United States, to a place called ADX Florence, a name that sends chills down the spines of even the most hardened criminals. This is Supermax, the highest security level in the US prison system, reserved for the worst of the worst. The design is as stark and unforgiving as the landscape that surrounds it. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in solitary confinement, their only window to the outside world a narrow slit in the ceiling. There's been a lot of debate about the psychological effects of this kind of isolation. Some argue it's cruel and unusual punishment, that it borders on torture. Whatever your stance, there's no denying the impact a place like ADX Florence has on the soul. Brazil now in a prison that no longer exists, but whose legend looms large in the national psyche Carandiru Penitentiary. This place was notorious, a byword for brutality and despair. Overcrowding, disease, violence, it was a breeding ground for all of them. Then came the massacre. A riot spiraled out of control, leaving 111 inmates dead, gunned down by police in a brutal show of force. Carandiru was eventually demolished, but the scars it left on Brazil remain. It stands as a stark reminder of what can happen when a society turns its back on its most vulnerable citizens. Thailand might conjure up images of idyllic beaches, with crystal-clear waters and white sandy shores that stretch for miles, and golden temples that gleam under the tropical sun, drawing tourists from all over the world. But tucked away from the tourist trail lies a darker reality. Bang Kwang Central Prison, known somewhat ironically as the Bangkok Hilton. This is where Thailand sends its serious offenders, the drug traffickers, murderers, and those who have committed grave crimes, and anyone else who's run afoul of the country's strict laws. The prison is notorious for its harsh conditions. Overcrowding is a major issue here, with cells designed for a handful of inmates crammed with dozens. The heat is stifling, making the environment almost unbearable. With cells designed for a handful of inmates crammed with dozens, the heat is stifling, the air thick with the stench of sweat, making it difficult to breathe, urine, and despair. The facilities are often unsanitary, adding to the inmates' misery. New inmates are shackled for the first 3 months, a practice that adds to their physical and mental anguish. Their legs bound together with heavy chains, making movement painful and difficult. But even in this oppressive environment, where hope seems like a distant dream, amidst the squalor and brutality, where violence is a daily occurrence, there are glimmers of hope. Inmates find ways to cope and support each other. Inmates finding solace in religion, in art, and in moments of reflection. In the simple act of human connection, they find a way to endure and survive. Next, we find ourselves in Bolivia, home to San Pedro Prison, a place that defies easy categorization. San Pedro operates on a rather unique system, one where the inmates, not the guards, are in control. It's a bizarre sort of self-governing democracy, where inmates elect their own leaders, run their own businesses, and even have their families living inside with them. San Pedro is still a dangerous place, riddled with drugs, violence, and corruption. The lines between guards and inmates are blurred, the power dynamics constantly shifting. What's fascinating about San Pedro is the sense of community that exists within its walls. Inmates forming strong bonds with each other, supporting each other's families, creating a life within the confines of their prison walls. Back to the vast expanse of Russia now, to a place so remote, so isolated, it feels like the edge of the world. Patak Island, home to White Swan Prison, a place where even the toughest criminals dread to tread. Surrounded by the icy waters of Lake Novozero, this is isolation on a whole other level. Inmates spend their days in near constant silence, forbidden from talking, forbidden from making eye contact, their only companions the ghosts of their past sins. The psychological toll is immense, but even in this desolate wasteland, amidst the icy winds and the crushing weight of despair, there are stories. Stories of resilience, of men finding solace in faith, in art, in the simple act of human connection. Our final destination takes us to Rwanda, to a place that stands as a stark reminder of the horrors that humanity is capable of inflicting upon itself. This is not just a story of a prison, but a story of human suffering and resilience. Gitarama Central Prison, a name synonymous with overcrowding, disease, and despair. Here the walls echo with the cries of those who have been forgotten by the world. Built to house a few hundred inmates, Gitarama was crammed with thousands, far exceeding its capacity, a sea of humanity crammed into every available space. The overcrowding was so severe that it defied belief. The conditions were beyond appalling. Filth and squalor were the norm. Men forced to stand for hours on end with no room to sit or lie down, their feet rotting beneath them, gangrene a constant threat. Gitarama was a nightmare, a place where hope was a distant memory, a vision of hell on earth. The sheer scale of suffering was unimaginable. It's a story that needs to be told, a story that must not be forgotten, a story that demands to be heard, echoing through the corridors of time. A story that reminds us that the fight for justice, for human rights, for a world free from such suffering is a fight that must never cease. We must remember Gitarama and ensure that such horrors are never repeated. The struggle for a just world continues. So there you have it, a glimpse into some of the most dangerous and disturbing prisons on our planet. Amidst the darkness, it's important to remember the glimmers of hope. The inmates who find solace in faith, in art, in the simple act of human connection. The fight for a more just and humane world continues, and it's a fight that demands our attention, our empathy, and our unwavering commitment.